Good morning and happy International Women's Day. I'm Emily Conroy, CEO of World Encounter, a nonprofit organization founded by Kurt Rosen in 1996 that brings capital, coaching, and community to women. We have offices in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Tanzania, Africa. With community help and volunteers, we raise funds annually to operate a microloan and mentorship program with women entrepreneurs in rural Tanzania. We have provided over 4,000 microloans and 13 years of business coaching to support women. The largest industry women start or expand businesses within in our World Encounter program is agriculture. And so whether that's poultry farming, growing grains, or baking, the women we serve in rural Tanzania face many of the same obstacles and joys as the women farmers, makers, and bakers here in Minnesota, and the lovely women that you see joining me today. I also want everyone to know that agriculture has been a big part of my life. I grew up on a dairy farm in Minnesota, and so it's kind of fun to see full circle how agriculture continues to be in my life as I work with getting women farmers, makers, and bakers started and launched in rural Tanzania. So it is my pleasure today to get to introduce you to my co-host and my childhood 4-H friend, Allie Peterson. Allie is a rural health family nurse practitioner and co-farmer with her husband, Luke. They are parents to 3 young children, and together they operate A-Frame Farm, growing organic grains and grass-fed beef. Allie, thank you for joining me this morning, and happy International Women's Day.
Oh, it's so good to be together. Thanks for that kind introduction. I am just thrilled. It feels so right and inspiring to be together today because it's spring in Minnesota and the sun is shining. And I think I'm just a person that's really like driven by the seasons. And so this feels like such a fresh time for this awesome conversation. Originally, when we planned this event, Molly Gaeckle, who owns and operates Northerly Flora, was going to be joining us. But her baby came earlier than expected. And so though she's not here with us this morning, we certainly wish her well. Babies are just a part of women in business. So I'd also like to take a minute here to announce the other 3 panelists. So first, Michele Huggins is the founder of Dope Creations in Granite Falls, Minnesota. Tiff Singh is the co-owner and baker at Lounge Bread in Minneapolis. And Hannah Barnstable is the founder and CEO of 7 Sundays in Minneapolis as well. So welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us.
So I'm very excited to learn from all of you today. And so let's jump in. This morning in our 9 a.m. session, I shared my very non-linear journey from growing up as a farm kid to running an international nonprofit. You'll be able to watch that video if you didn't catch our 9 a.m. session. But I'm speaking to business owners right now, and we know that it never really is a linear approach. And for many business owners, the journey starts by fighting the pulls of what other people want us to be rather than pursuing our own dreams. And so my first question for you today is share with us how you got started in your business. And if you wanted to expand on what your business is, that would be helpful for our audience. So share with us how you started your business and how you fought those pulls. Allie, will you kick us off?
You bet. Yeah. So my husband, Luke, and I have been farming since about 2011, but organically since we began transitioning in 2013. Just this last year, we began renting acreage from Carmen and Sally Fernhulls. And so we took on their farm name of A-Frame Farm and their legacy, which is just incredible. They started farming organically in 1972 before organic farming was even a thing. And so in addition to farming with my husband, I also am in my 5th year of practice as a family nurse practitioner in our small town clinic in Dawson. And then I'm about halfway through my program for my 2nd graduate degree to become a certified nurse midwife. So I'm very passionate about women's health And that's another reason I think why this conversation was such an easy yes for me. In the beginning, as we moved towards organic, I think we maybe overestimated like what other people thought. In general, I think that, you know, people aren't necessarily against you doing something new. People want you to succeed, but there's always just that little bit of like undertone of skepticism as to like whether we could really pull it off or not. And we certainly, you know, had our critics, but I would say that some of the real pulls for us were like financial, logistical, and then just basic knowledge deficit. In the beginning, when we moved from conventional into organics, we grew specialty crops. And so as we diversified our crop rotation, we had to learn about all these new growing practices. We took on financial risks of growing crop that wasn't backed by crop insurance at the time. We had to afford the cash rent and be able to compete, you know, for cash rent in the county with what the growing rates were. And our neighbors in that current conventional system really were backed pretty heavily by government subsidies. So they were able to pay, you know, that amount. We had expenses, you know, in land rent and machinery, repairs, seed, fertility, and all of those costs are they're set by, you know, the current conventional system, which focuses mainly on yield. And so in organics and moving towards regenerative, our focus is different. You know, we're growing these specialty crops, and we're trying to build long-term relationships with the companies that buy our grain in this direct market fashion. And we're trying to really provide nutritious food, you know, for the consumers and support soil health along the way, and grow this new local food economy instead of this focus that we walked away from, which was more like bushels per acre, you know, bottom line. So we rent all of our farmland. And so the landowners too, in the beginning for us, were, you know, a little hesitant to let us newbies try and farm organically. I think mostly due to the fear of the weeds, whether or not we'd be able to pay cash rent. And so those landowners also took a risk with us, and we had to get creative in accessing capital for our operating note back then. But looking back, I think we were able to be successful because we started really small. So we scaled back from our 300 acres we were farming to about 80. And we transitioned that to organic. And for anybody who's ever grown a garden without chemicals, you can imagine like the sense of overwhelm that we felt, of how we would keep these weeds out of the field, and, you know, have it so that they wouldn't take over our crop. But, you know, we spent a lot of time pulling old broken down machinery out of groves that people just weren't even using anymore, fixing on that. And we really, we were scrappy in the beginning to keep our costs down, but I feel like we did a good job. And as people began to see our success, we were approached with more opportunities to rent land, and oftentimes from women and landowners, you know, who really care about the legacy of their farmland. And so this year now we're farming over 700 acres organically and regeneratively. And so I guess that's a little bit of our backstory. Michele, do you think you'd be willing to kind of take over and answer our question as well, as far as the journey that we were on, and then fighting the pulls of what other people maybe wanted for you along the way?
Absolutely. Thank you, Allie. And, you know, first I'd like to thank both Allie and Emily for extending the invitation for me to have a seat at the table with these fascinating women. Women's History Month, following on the heels of Black History Month, has made me feel really celebrated and important. Our ancestors fought hard to grant us the liberties that we all deserve. So I'm choosing to be intentional about claiming these gifts daily, and I advocate for righting injustices and balancing out all inequalities that are still very present today. So thank you. And you know, this foundation was set for me at a very young age. My mom would always say, if you start out right, you end up right. Like I can hear her voice in my head, if you start out right, you end up right. And you know, during different stages of my journey, that saying has meant different things to me. So I started right by doing the right things as a child, you know, not touching the stove because I was told it was hot, getting good grades in school so that I could attend the right college, graduating with honors so that I could find the right job, giving my all to work to reach the right rung on the corporate ladder, and, you know, making the right choices and following the laws to become a model citizen. But in doing that, like, where was I ending up? I was just burnt out, I was tired, and I felt underappreciated. And I was firing on all cylinders, and it was leading me just completely empty. But still, you know, I kept going. I was trying to stay on the right path. But as I got older, I realized that I didn't have as much control of my journey as I thought. And life kind of started making these choices for me. So my partner got a new job in rural Southwest Minnesota. Granite Falls, just a little context, Granite Falls has one stoplight. Its population is 2,700 people, and the demographic is 90% white. So if I moved there, life was going to shift from everything that I knew. People told me that a city girl like me would die from boredom living here. And I tried to just cling to my corporate job that I'd known for decades, just fighting this simple life. But, you know, after his 2 years of weekend commuting 150 miles to the cities, we knew that something just had to give. So fast forward, I had to find my new right so that I could grasp where I'd end up on this new journey. And this is kind of like where the fog starts to creep in. My recollection of how I got started is kind of cloudy. So I've been trying to create a founder story, and it's been super difficult because, to me, found implies that I was actually looking for something, but I didn't seek this out. Like, it found me. I wouldn't have ever thought that I'd have a basement full of scobies and fermented veggies. And I didn't think that keeping a sourdough starter would lead me to creating Dope Creations, which I founded in 2018. Maybe it was just suggested that I start selling all the creations that I'd been giving away. Who knows? But I know that once I started bouncing the ideas around in my head and gaining confidence, excuse me, that I could actually be a business owner, then business plans and branding ideas and all of that would just start coming to me in my dreams. And then I started listening, and then I started doing. I began marketing myself around town, and that created some buzz. I ended up in the local paper, and momentum kind of just built from there. I was selling around town, and that worked for a while, and I was happy with that. I was getting to know my neighbors and other community members, but I needed to reach more people. So finally I got on social media. Oh, I fought it for years. And I also joined the Etsy community. So I am making Dope Creations more visible nationwide now. And so here I am. That's my right. I'm accepting the fact that I'm an artisan bread maker who incorporates her love of hip hop into her brand and weaves that into honoring the stolen land on which I live. I'll continue to only partner with honest farmers like Allie and Luke, who also believe that if you start out right, you end up right.
Thank you. I love that. If you start out right, you end out right. And, you know, that's a big goal of what we have with the women we serve in rural Tanzania. We are not a nonprofit that just hands capital to women. We hand capital with support. And so we want to have them start out right. So the capital, the microloan, is paired with business coaching and 10 women success circles where they cross guarantee and support each other. And it's not just like a one and done, like, let's meet and support these women. It's literally walking along these women every month for 3 years. And so I just love that quote. Thank you, Michele. Tiff, will you share with us how you got started with your business and how you fought any polls?
Hi, yes. I'm so happy to be a part of this conversation today on International Women's Day, and so very inspired by all of the women here, and also that I have come across in agriculture and the food community. It's truly amazing to find myself in the same group of women. And a little backstory about Launa bread and just my journey in baking. It kind of happened organically, and it wasn't like a strong pursuit of mine to envision that I would be a business owner, but just that I've always worked in the food industry, and baking has been a long part of my life since I was a teenager. And it's always provided me a lot of comfort and respite in hard times and also in wonderful, joyous times as well. And I find that there is always so much community rooted around food and baking, and it is like such an honor to share that with family and friends and community. So I think that is one of the biggest pulls for me in terms of why I do what I do. And for Launa Bread, I found that in being a baker and being in the industry, there were just always a lot of certain demands that kind of offset the balance that I needed in my life. And as becoming a new parent and juggling all these different pieces in my life, becoming a business owner and finding a strong partner that valued really locally sourced ingredients and nutritious and healthful food was what helped drive me to join my partner in Launa Bread. It was originally started in 2015, and later I joined in 2019. And we started out very small. Launa Bread is a subscription-based bakery that focuses in naturally leavened bread and in sourdough breads. And Launa Bread has grown in such a way that I never imagined. It's been really an amazing opportunity to continue to build a place in our community, as well as building and forging new relationships like with Luke and Allie and other farmers in the Midwest. And I think that, sorry, I'm a little bit flustered here, but we feel as though building this community of bakers and makers and growers is just helping strengthen the vision that we have of supporting our local food economy. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Tiff. Still going off the adrenaline of our tech issue this morning. But Hannah, will you share with us your story?
Sure. Thanks, Emily. Thanks everybody on the panel and everybody here today. Big, important day, and this is really an honor to be here. Yeah, my name is Hannah, and I founded a cereal company, a brand that is sold in grocery stores. So you can see a couple examples behind me. In my path, Michele, you're all going to hear a lot of parallels, I think, throughout this panel discussion, and we've all met each other and already discovered some of them. But my path here, again, not super lineal. I went to college. I was the first in my family to get a 4-year college degree. And then in my head, it was, okay, now you go and you get, the best job that you can and you work your way up, right? And I was raised by relatively quote unquote feminist parents. And so I was like, this is going to be, I'm going to go do it. So I ended up in a pretty predominantly male career path, which was investment banking in finance. And I really loved it. I love numbers. I love businesses. But by my late 20s was when I started to sort of, I guess, look around me at all the, again, predominantly men that I was working with. And I just really couldn't envision myself kind of in that next phase going down that career path. So I think like a lot of women, a part of me felt a little bit like a failure, having been raised by feminist parents saying I can push through these glass ceilings or whatever it might be. But I just looked around and I just could not envision myself sitting there for the next 10 years of my life. So the spark happened then, and the way that I ended up in cereal, all sorts of different pieces involved. A honeymoon trip to New Zealand where I discovered muesli cereal and fell in love, and couldn't believe, just kind of came back and was appalled by the cereal aisle all of a sudden, just like, really? this is what we're doing. Food's come all this way, and it's still here, just like a pile of sugar. So I saw a need there. I also, even though I was in finance, I worked with food companies. And so a lot of my job was actually, touring food plants, and like my research was walking in grocery stores. And again, a lot of the businesses I was touring were male run kind of corporations. And I just couldn't connect. I suddenly started realizing like, wow, this frozen pizza, trying to connect your food to food when you're walking in a food plant. I was having a really hard time with that. Okay. So just different practices that were in place, trying to understand why it was so complicated to make a jar of salsa or whatever it might be. I didn't understand. I believe that, food is precious. It's an experience, and it should be the way Mother Nature intended it to be. So a lot of different factors at play, right? It was like, can't be an investment banker for the rest of my life. I know there's an opportunity in cereal to make a better breakfast. And I think there's just a better way to run a food company. Like, I think you can connect with the farmers. I think you can not overcomplicate it and make clean labels. If you're going to make a berry cereal, it should have berries in it, right? So I set off and to do that. And I put in my notice, and I was like panicked, you guys. I mean, just panicked. I remember calling my boss and then like sprinting out of the office after I left him a voicemail because I was so embarrassed, which is bizarre thinking back, but I was in my late 20s, and I felt that there was an expectation of me to continue down the track. And I also felt like going into becoming a food entrepreneur as a woman, I think I had a fear that people wouldn't take me seriously. And that stuck with me for a while, like just kind of transitioning. Oh, cute. You're going to start a healthy cereal company. That's really cute, Hannah, and I was so passionate about it. And I would say the way that I kind of got through that sticky area of just like, okay, I know that I need to do this. It was really just, everybody has their own moment of, okay, I'm going to take the leap. Right. And for me, it was, and hopefully some people can relate to this, but it was less about the idea so much as it was knowing that I wanted something different. I could look forward and say, well, I absolutely know this isn't for me. So, I'm going to take a shot at this. And then, you navigate your way through, but there were more than a couple people who just flat out told me not a good idea. Like, you should probably just stick to course, Hannah. Like, you're doing good in this job. And so that was tough, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs face that, where it's just a direct on, and Allie, you said skepticism. I mean, isn't that what starting a company is all about? And so what I've learned that's very important is, people are going to think you're crazy, because if you're starting a company, you're doing something innovative. If they don't think you're crazy, then it must not be exciting, and it must not be new enough, right? No one's thought of this before. So it's okay if there's skepticism, and it's actually probably a good thing. So that's where we ended up. We're a small team here in Minneapolis, and we do continue to build our network of direct farmers for all of our products, and that's where we're at today.
Thanks, Hannah. I love the stories of your own unique businesses in past, and it reminded me of one of the women that we work with, Farida, because we have Michele, Tiff, and Hannah who are, making food and selling it to their consumers in their community. And we also have Allie, who is also making food, but hers isn't the like ready to eat. She's selling her grain over to the other women. Am I correct in saying that? And that's what Farida does. She sources her grain from other women in our program who are farmers and are growing the crops and the grains. And then she, in Tanzania, it's called bites. And so she is like milling the grain and making these bites. And it's very similar to like what Michele was talking, like a subscription service. So her neighbors, like that's their breakfast in the morning. So they subscribe to her business, and every morning they get these fresh baked bites from Farida. And the women in these rural villages of Tanzania, they're like what Hannah just mentioned, like they're breaking barriers. They're paving new pathways for other women and girls in their communities. They're being innovative and finally standing in their power. And it's just just a joy and exciting to watch. And knowing that our conversation is really focused around farmers, makers, and bakers, I'd love to hear from our audience of, are there other farmers, makers, and bakers in our audience right now? So there's a chat. I'd love if you're listening and joining us today, just go into the chat box, say who you are, and let us know if you're a farmer, a maker, or baker. And we just love to be able to connect with you. Okay, Allie.
Emily, I want to just dovetail real quick on what you had mentioned, with Farida's business and how like there's so much resiliency in that, right? Like depending on each other and making like a better system where you're buying from people again, and you're so much less reliant on, like an outside corporate sources, I guess you could say. But when you're buying from people, you know what you're getting. And so I'm super excited right now. Like if I had to recognize one thing about how things are just kind of moving and shifting with where Luke and I are at right now, it would just be this awesome energy around consumer awareness and just like demand for quality food, which I feel like is we're at a different place with it, than historically speaking. And so I think that like on our farm, we try to really raise a lot of awareness around climate change and water quality, land degradation and carbon sequestration, and educate like our consumers and be transparent with our social media platforms about how we're farming differently. And this just is really, it's different. People recognize it as being different from kind of the big agricultural machine, which is like, you have to get bigger or get out, like there's in this model, there's room for everybody to do something new and innovative and support each other in it. And so, I kind of shared my experience on the farm of like what I'm excited about. I'm kind of curious from the rest of you about what's exciting you within your specific sectors right now, and then how that kind of impacts the lives of your customers and your communities. Tiff, why don't you lead off if you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I hear a really similar echo in what you're talking about, Allie, and this consumer awareness right now. And part of Lona Bread is that one of the words that keeps coming up in my conversations with Chris is our intentionality of being purposeful in the energy we're putting into making healthy bread and pastries for people, but also before that even begins, we need to be intentional with the grain and the other ingredients that we're sourcing. And one of the tools that we use in our social media is the tool of transparency and documenting and displaying in our daily newsletter, or in our quarterly newsletters, of the ingredients that we use every quarter, and breaking that down by percentages and telling our customer base, like, look, this is how much we sourced from Minnesota farmers and producers, which was close to, I believe, 66% of our ingredients was sourced from Minnesota this past quarter. And then additionally, over 70% of our total ingredient consumption from eggs, dairy, and other ingredients and produce was sourced here in Minnesota. So I think that our customer base really values that conversation that we're having with each other, and relaying that and tying that to our farmers and producers, because it really creates a long chain of communication that you can, as a consumer, understand that, look, this bread that I'm purchasing from my baker in my community is using 100% or 95% ingredients from farmers like Luke and Allie or Mark Askegard up in northern Minnesota. And that is like such, in today's age when our whole food system has been broken down into this corporate structure of not knowing who our distributors are, our farmers are, and our makers are, it's like an exhilarating and exciting time to know that we can build a system that is working and thriving for each other and supporting each other, but also our communities. So I think that's one of the most exciting things for us right now is the community response of wanting to be connected and rooted from the bakers that make their bread to the farmers that are growing their grain. And it's a tremendously exciting time.
Absolutely. And you and Chris are so talented. I mean, the quality is just outstanding, you know, and you can taste like your hands and your, you know, the passion that you've put into the products that you provide for your customers. So yeah, that's awesome, Tiff. How about Hannah? Can you share with us a little bit about what's got you fired up? And
Sure, of course. I mean, it's a loaded question because there's a lot of great things going on in food for sure. And I'll just kind of first echo that, yes, you know, clean label and knowing where the ingredients are coming from is a huge trend that we see in grocery stores and in all kinds of packaged food products. We're a little bit, we sell our product all over the country, even though we, you know, really focus on production and sourcing here close to home. So yeah, so I think the clean label, and then, you know, Allie, more on what you're saying, I think that this next round, so I always used to think, like, I grew up in the 80s where everybody, you know, the consumer and the retailer, everybody's really focused on the nutritional panel. It was like fat, right? Like low fat or whatever it might be. And I think there's been these new consumer shifts that are impacting packaged food. And one is they're shifting from the nutritional panel down to that ingredient list, right? That's like, I don't really care what, you know, what you did to calculate that. I want to know what's in this product that I'm going to feed my family or myself. So there's been a shift to that, which I'm a huge fan of because you can sort of manipulate that nutritional panel. And then the other shift is sustainability and regeneration in food, conserving resources. And there's a couple of our larger customers. I'll give some examples of what just in the last few months where we've seen some of that play out, which is really exciting, I think, because it's one thing for the consumer to start keeping an eye on, you know, kind of paying attention to things like regenerative grains. But we had our, when we launched a new box cereal this last year that is made with regenerative sunflower meal. And it's actually an upcycled product too, if anybody knows what that is. It's basically when you remove something from the waste stream. So there's a wonderful cold pressed sunflower processor here in Minnesota called Smoothies. And they were basically pressing out the oil, and there's no real market for this sunflower meal. So we developed that into a cereal. So it's technically upcycled. But my story on the retailer side was that we kind of loosely shared it with Whole Foods. And they're a pretty big beast out there as far, I mean, they're a natural market, but they're big. And they were so excited about the regenerative story, the upcycled story, and they were the first to launch it. And they really cared about those underlying, you know, things that were going on in food. And then the other one is we do some business with Costco in the Midwest, and we're working on a project with them where it's a muesli cereal coming out next month. And we are highlighting all the farms that we're using. And this was kind of an idea we brought to them and co-created with them. But just like if you're at a grocery or a restaurant, you know, and you see like the farms listed on the menu. And so they're, you know, we're going to play this up and really showcase the farms and where all the berries and the grains and everything comes from. So things like that are really exciting to me, because that is when I see the retailers now resonating with these stories, I know that it's big enough, you know, for them to care and to be on their radar. So those are the things that I think are exciting within packaged food specifically.
That's awesome, Hannah. Man, thank you, thank you, thank you for recognizing the farmer in it. And, I think the better that we can all like collaborate and showcase what each other are doing, like it's all about working together and lifting each other up. So thank you for that. That's just awesome. Let's see, Michele, can you share with us a little bit about what's got you kind of excited these days and how it impacts the consumer or your end users?
Sure. And I'm loving this overlap. I love that some of the same things that I'm doing in, small town USA are happening in larger cities. That's just really amazing to me. Just echoing what the women said, but it's just one more thing to add is just that we all know that COVID's been really fatally destructive. It's affected us both indirectly and directly, right? So at the start of the pandemic, there were a lot of supply chain issues and it halted the distribution of flour. So what's excited me is just the move for consumers to seek out like alternate food sources. People from all over the country started ordering fresh milled organic Minnesota grain from me. And, although the previous shortages have now been fixed, like customers are still buying this flour from me because they actually prefer it. So, this kind of circles back to the story that I had earlier, that seeking out the alternative when your norm has been disrupted and realizing that the new way is actually better is pretty cool, right? So it's exciting to see that rural Minnesota farmers and their healthier and more nutrient-rich products are being celebrated like across the country. So that's good. And hopefully I'll be gaining some more attention in this. Pioneer PBS is interested in showcasing dope creations as well as A-Frame Farm. So be on the lookout for that and hopefully getting the word out even more.
And I love how, like Michele said, that she likes to see these overlaps of the other women in Minnesota in bigger cities. And I love seeing and hearing the overlaps of what the women in rural Tanzania are doing. And it's such, the way you're operating is such a sustainable system. And that's why we see the businesses in rural Tanzania working as well. And it's really that collaboration over competition and coming from a source of abundance. Like, I was telling Allie the other day that, there might be 10 poultry farmers and 10 bakers in one village, but they're feeding like their direct neighbors. And then they're supporting the direct growers. And it's such a sustainable system. And one of the questions that I got asked the most when traveling to Tanzania is like, oh my gosh, what are you going to eat while you're there? Because a lot of people haven't traveled into a third world country, a developing area. Again, to remind the audience, World Encounter, we are intentional about going into the most remote rural villages where no other nonprofits or NGOs are serving. So it's literally like off-roading to go to these villages. We're kind of like banking and programming on wheels. We have to travel to the small villages to work with our women. But when you arrive there is an abundance of fresh produce to be had. Like like one of my favorite, foods is like avocado toast. Well, they don't have toasters and toast because they're not electricity, but they make called chapati. And so I would like put avocado on that in the morning. And we have salt miners who are like going and basically like digging sand, draining out the salt and selling salt. So there's access to all this fresh produce. And so I definitely did not go hungry and did not like experience anything but an abundance of fresh fruit and mango every day for breakfast. Like just so it's fun just to hear just the different food systems and just women supporting women. And that's a shift, that is something that we're moving to, and International Women's Day has been created for, and Women's History Month this doesn't mean today's the only day to celebrate women and talk about our advances and fight for equity and equality. This is just one day to highlight it. We should be celebrating these things every day and moving toward equality and equity every single day. but life is all about changes. It's constantly changing, and we're navigating all these changes that have come to us, whether it's social, Molly was supposed to be on us today. She's a new mom. That is a significant change in an individual's life that she'll have to learn to navigate. The pandemic, we all had to shift and navigate on that. But one thing that helps ground us and keep us moving forward with changes is mentorship. World Encounter really values mentorship. It's built into our structure. That's why you don't just get a microloan, you get a 10-woman success circle and business coaching. So it's just wrapped in this like network of community support and mentorship. And this is important no matter where you live. And so I would love to hear about the season of life you're in and the mentorship that you have or seek. And in some of that mentorship, if you have advice for anyone in our audience who is also in your industry or aspiring to be. Yeah, Allie, you want to kick us off?
Sure, you bet. Yeah, I'll kind of start. I think I would have to say that our greatest farming mentors have definitely been Carmen and Sally Fernholz. They founded A-Frame Farm, like I had said, in 1972 and retired from farming last year. And now they are renting us their farmland. And they've just helped us navigate so much since the beginning. But I remember back in 2013 when we were first, transitioning, we called Carmen and Luke was on the phone with him and I was in the background and we were just like, can we really do this? Like, can we, like, are we really going to be able to do this? Like, how are we going to be able to keep the weeds out? There's no way. Like, and he just said, why can't you do it? Just why can't you do it? And it's just like, you know what, if he could do it, we could do it. And I think that that just has always stuck with us. And, so importantly, we had like 40 plus years of his agronomic experience to benefit from in the field. And so now that he's retired, he's more involved with like the policy work and, collective marketing agencies and just paying it forward to the next generation, which is also a beautiful example, for us as newer farmers. But I guess if I were to pass along one word of advice to somebody who's maybe in a position to just make a change, and this isn't just in farming, but in anything, it's just like, I think that the biggest risk is not taking the risk. Right? Like our lives are short. Just start somewhere and just try it. And when you're going towards something that you're passionate about and you're really interested in, it feels easy in that regard to spend, a lot of time and energy to move your plan forward. And so panel, I'm just gonna ask you to, let's start this time. Let's go with Michele. What do you think as far as mentorship that you've had along the way and maybe advice that you could pass along to somebody else?
Yeah, Allie, like you're in my head. So like, I don't want to sound cliche or anything, but the advice I have is, just do it. Like Nike used it and it worked, right? So just do it. There's no better time than the present. If you keep waiting for the most opportune time to do something, you could miss out. So, I'd also advise that if you're interested in starting a business, that you do something that you're actually passionate about. Being a business owner carries a lot of long hours and several roles that you may not be accustomed to doing. So if there's a task that you know that you're not interested in doing, you may want to, outsource that. Mentorship. I don't really have a single person to whom I like direct questions, but it's rather a tribe of positive humans that I try to surround myself with, right? Because if you're in that good energy, then good things will come from it. So I also just try to stay aware of what's going on like around me and in the industry. If you stay current, then, you can be ahead of and on top of things. And you can probably hear in the background, but my daughter is definitely an inspiration. She just helps me be better every day. So that's where my mentorship and stuff comes from.
That's awesome. I love it. Kids just push us, don't they? They push us to do better and be better. Hannah, Hannah, what do you think in
Yeah.
terms of your experience with mentorship?
Yeah. Well, yes to it. I mean, yeah, because I think that you can spin your wheels a lot of times. And, the idea of mentorship is so critical when you're starting your own business. Like Michele said, you're going to be doing things that roles and tasks and things that you never were trained to do, right? So you're starting your own business. So having that mentorship is key. I kind of tried a bunch of different things. Like I joined CEO roundtables, and I considered, management boards and things like that. And ultimately, it's like 4 to 6 of my women entrepreneur friends where we are on like the level of someone can send a 2-page long email and we will all be there, right? And talking, or, you run into an issue and you can call one of them crying. I mean, it's like, as it turns out, women entrepreneurs, I think, they can relate, they can help guide you. And I'm very passionate about that. Just having a network of women who have been in the trenches and are in the trenches with you. I think that has been invaluable. And I think as far as advice, after you go and just do it, then make sure that you stick to your path and that you are paving your own path. I feel like I have this theme that keeps coming up, but I mean, I think so many people want to come in and tell you, I don't know, what it should look like, or maybe what you should be doing, or maybe this should be your mission, or maybe this would make more money, or whatever it might be. And you have to be like really firm. And sometimes, like for me, it just requires like spending a day or two alone and like journaling and remembering what my mission is to like get me back on track. Because once you decide to do it, you will find some, you might find that as a woman entrepreneur, you want to do things differently. You want to run a company differently. You want to hire differently. And it's going to be weird because no one, the traditional business models might not look the same as yours. And it's a kind of a vulnerable place to be in. And I just would encourage, with the mentorship of other people in the trenches, to also just keep coming back to, you are on your own path, and that is good. Like that is how you are going to make change in the world. So that's what I would say.
That's so powerful. That alone time piece and just like the centering, it takes dedication and just like self-discipline. It's big, definitely. Tiff, how about you?
I would say that for mentorship for myself, and also just as us as a business, is we have always been so fortunate to reach out to fellow bakers that have started their own businesses, but also in this time that I've been a part of Launa, I've been thinking more about this in general as a woman in business, and how we can sometimes get inside our heads a little bit and think like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this by myself, or I should know how to do this, or X or Y. But really embracing that even if you're on your own path, like there are so many people that are around you that want to see you succeed, that being humble and asking for help, or asking for guidance, or how did you do this, or what are you doing here, or I think that it's being mindful of ourselves to like be open to asking the questions of how to grow a healthy business. Or like, it's been really inspiring to become a part of the farmers markets and seeing so many women having their own stalls or working in partnership with their own vendor stalls, and just having conversations with them and building that camaraderie. And that is mentorship in itself, of like like a little bit what Hannah was saying, is like building a community of women and building a community of business owners that we may not know the answers, but collectively, when we start having conversations with each other, we start building relationships and finding answers together, or building collaborations. Molly's not here with us today. But as being friends before business owners, and then we've kind of found ourselves on this business path together and forging that collaboration and business relationship with our separate businesses, and seeing how we can, in this ecosystem of women entrepreneurs and small businesses, how we can help each other and lift each other up has just been a huge way to support each other. So I guess in mentorship, I see it more as like partnership in the community. And that's one of the biggest things that I would advocate for people who want to start a business, is to see and look around who's around you, who wants to help you succeed, and figuring out how you can build and make that happen.
Absolutely. It really is that community support, or that sisterhood that you can build with other entrepreneurs, and like Hannah said, like other women in the trenches. Or, if for me, I found that surrounding myself with other women leaders, business owners who are also mothers, because there's another variable that gets thrown into the mix when you're also the caretaker of children. And so and it goes back to why we have the 10 women success circles in Tanzania. It is the number one reason why the businesses that have been launched through our microloan program are successful and sustainable. World Encounter has 100% loan repayment rate. And when I interview our participants and ask why, how is this happening, it all goes back to like the gratitude they have of being put in these 10 women success circles. And some of them started out as like acquaintances, maybe friends or neighbors, but I had one woman say, by the end of 3 years, these women are my sisters and I love them. And they lift me up. They give me hope when things aren't great. And then they celebrate with me when things are terrific. And so it's so important. And World Encounter is going to keep showing up every day to advocate for women and get more access to capital. And I know that you four are also going to show up every day and keep just being trailblazers in your industry, and providing spaces and opportunities for aspiring farmers, makers, and bakers to grow as well. And so I want to talk about barriers and how we can just break those barriers down. So my question to all of you are, what stereotypes or myths have you encountered running your business, and what are ways we can break those and support more women in BIPOC communities within agriculture? Allie.
I feel like this might be the most important question of the day, Emily. I really do. So thanks for asking it, because it's a tough one. I think that, as a woman who is a nurse practitioner, so in healthcare, but then also farming with my husband, there's a stereotype, that I'm the nurse practitioner and that Luke's the farmer, and that the woman's role on the farm is maybe a little bit less than, because it's about just the cooking, or giving rides here and there, maybe some books, these kind of things. But the reality is that like my husband and I really play equal but different roles on the farm. He certainly does more of the field work, but I'm behind the scenes helping with all of the everyday things stay on track. And I have to just share that, like, in fact, Carmen and Sally, they're retired now, but Sally continues to contribute. Like, it's just in her and she just can't help it. Like Luke called me this morning. He's on his way to go pick up seed in Albert Lea, Minnesota, which is about a 5-hour drive. And Sally had him all packed up to go with a lunch, before he left. And she just does that. And, the cooking, the gardening, some of these things that we do, I think that it's equally as important, sourcing and the nutritious meals and these things that we do. I take a lot of pride in that role, and I think that just like my mom, Marcy, and my grandma Tootie and Agnes and my great grandma Esther, like, it goes back generations, these women who just did it, they did it. And I think if we could break down one barrier, it would just be that, like, women in farm families could be viewed as having an equal role on the farm, and that their contributions no longer go unrecognized or that their labor go unpaid. I think that, you know, it is breaking away a little bit from generations of farm families in my community that have maybe viewed women in a little bit of a lesser light. I guess I have to credit my ability to have this position, you know, within my family and within our farm to my mother-in-law, Dawn, because Luke and I just never questioned breaking away from that gender stereotype, that barrier, because Luke's mom was an entrepreneur and always financially independent. And so she parented while owning her own clothing store, and then went on to start her own realty business and be a broker. And so, you know, Dawn was Luke's example of normal growing up. And so I think that like he had that deep level of respect for the woman's role, so to speak, ingrained at him in a young age. And so I think that, you know, through that financial stability within the family that the woman could have, I'm able to have as much say as I do in our operation. I've always been as equally as invested as Luke, and I think his wins are my wins and vice versa. And, you know, he's supported my educational endeavors and job opportunities with my nursing career too. So I think, you know, we're all just better off when we have equal voices. And then I'll also just say that as a Caucasian woman, I can be intentional with my food dollars. And Luke and I can continue to be mindful, you know, as we widen this good food and good farming community, that we seek out collaborative relationships with other BIPOC and women farmers, makers, and bakers every chance that we get. So, Tiff, tell me a little bit more about, you know, your take on this question with stereotypes and how we break down some of these barriers.
You know, thank you, Ellie. I would say that with the barriers of being a woman in the food industry, you experience, or we as women experience, a lot of sexism through different an array, a spectrum, and it is becoming aware of that, and it's empowering to become a woman entrepreneur in that sense of that we as women can create a more mindful working environment for our future staff. As a business owner, and the stereotypes, to be quite frank, I feel like the community that we're in and the community that supports us, we are very fortunate to not experience any hostility. I personally haven't as a female business owner thus far, but I do know that the means of needing support and partnership, there are a lot of barriers with access to loans and financing, and I do believe that it is prevalent in the food industry when you want to start your business, that it's women are questioned in terms of like, are they capable? And absolutely they are, because as women, we are so accustomed to putting on so many different hats throughout the day and in our lives. In a lot of ways, I think becoming a business owner can become just, it feels natural, because we are thriving in so many different aspects of our lives right now. But in terms of being the BIPOC community and the mindfulness of that, I think that it's really important to be self-aware of opening the doors and opportunities for other people of color to have a voice at the table. Or one of the goals that Launa Bread has, once we eventually open our own permanent space, is to continue outreach in our communities and also offer up a space for aspiring bakers or other bakers in the community that that wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity or a platform. So that has been like in our future business plan to build those relationships further on, and offer whatever we can to pay it forward. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Tiff. I just want to acknowledge that we are at our time, but this is such a rich conversation and question that I do want to get to the final two panelists before we say our goodbyes. Michele does have another time commitment, so we're going to go ahead and let her answer this question now and say her goodbyes, and then we'll let Hannah answer it and then do our closing. So take it away, Michele.
Great, thank you. And sorry to be abrupt, I will answer this very important question briefly. And I thank the women on this panel for, you know, being those advocates and those supporters, as I had said earlier. But with me, stereotypes besides the obvious was just originally I encountered the stereotype that new members of the community, meaning that you don't have like deep roots here and generations of, you know, ancestors, is that you're just kind of passing through. So initially there was a perception that my business wouldn't last because I wouldn't stay here. So I encountered lots of skepticism and kind of just like distrust in my brand because I wasn't established at all here. So plus I didn't really have an agriculture background. So becoming part of the community was definitely a struggle in the beginning. So I kind of just chose to overcome that by volunteering, being present, not just being a face around town, but an actual name. And then just connecting with a lot of different organizations around here, participating in civic engagement, making sure that I'm giving back. And I think that that kind of just will help pave the way, is making sure that you are being like a staple in your community, you know, not just taking up space, but actually doing. So with that, I'll pass it on. But I thank you so much for letting me be a part of this, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Okay, take it away, Hannah.
Okay, I'll be quick, even though I am incredibly passionate about it, this last topic. I would just directly say, I think that women entrepreneurs are not taken as seriously as male entrepreneurs. Where I saw this most starkly was, I remember attending a kind of a startup event where they had a women's pitch fest that they plugged in at like 9 p.m., you know, after everybody was on their way home. And I sat through these presentations of these phenomenal women who had patents and, I mean, just dedicated their life work to what they were building. And, you know, I remember they put up a stat that was like just shocking. It was 97% of funding for startups is men investing in men. It's unbelievable. And on top of that, I am incredibly passionate about women entrepreneurs. I think we are natural entrepreneurs. I don't think that the corporate world is necessarily set up well for us and how we operate. And Tiff, you mentioned this in our early call that we just had with us, something about, and I'll botch it, but it's something about puzzle pieces and saying like, life is different pieces, and entrepreneurship allows us to be in charge of our own, you know, how those pieces all fit together. And it's precisely the reason why I left that corporate world to start a company, so that I could figure out how that looked my own way, right? So I think we're natural entrepreneurs. Every woman entrepreneur I meet is doing it not for profit, but for this bigger passion. And I just think to this day, you know, we're just not taken as seriously. And I've sat through many meetings where I travel across the country with 3 little kids at home, so excited to tell somebody about my product, a retail buyer, and they happen to be old school male who sits back and just wants to give me lessons the entire 30-minute, like precious 30 minutes. So I do run into that still. And it sounds, you know, like we should be past it, but we're not. Like I sit through these meetings where I'm being taught, you know, when I hear, you know, so anyway, the way that I think we need to start breaking through it is we should be very aware of those status quos that are in place. And I think we just need to talk about them and address them. And even if it's just to our loyal followings on social media, you know, just bring them into light and expose it and share the stats and share the struggles. And, you know, eventually, you know, we should get to the point where we are stopping the person who's not letting us speak, and, you know, really just being more assertive and confident. And that needs to happen too. And I'm sure we can do it, but those barriers are there. And I think you know, it's going to require just bringing them into light and exposing them.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of a common theme I heard from all of you is two things, like first addressing the problem. So let's talk about it. Let's get it out there in the open, and then let's act on it. And so I'm just so thankful that you were all here to have this conversation with us today. Like I said, we have gone over our time, and so we'll kind of jump to our closing statements. I can't speak for everyone, but this webinar will be, our International Women's Day Summit goes through 1 p.m. So I'm able to answer any questions, but if you have specific questions for any of the panelists, go back to women.worldencounter.org. Find the woman that you have a question for, and her contact information, website, social media pages, they're all there. So connect directly with these women. And I highly encourage you to learn more about all of our speakers today. Allie has a few closing statements, and I do as well. But as you guys leave and hopefully join us for our next session at 12, it is International Women's Day, so I would love to hear from all of those who are still on this session. Go into the chat box and tell us who is a woman that has inspired you, and just if that woman is still part of your life, reach out to her today and say, thank you, you're an inspiration to me, and happy International Women's Day. But I want to hear who you are going to reach out to and say hello to, because you could seriously make a woman's day today by such a simple act of just texting them, calling them, and saying, thank you, you inspire me. So let us know if you're going to reach out and who that woman is. I want to say I'm inspired by my panel guests today. It has been such a joy to talk to you and to meet you. And it's just the start of our partnership and friendship as women and business owners, and striving for a better community and a better world for all. So Allie, I'll let you say your closing statements.
Yeah, absolutely. Just especially Tiff, Michele, and Hannah, and Molly, if she could have been here, but I just want to say one more time, thank you so much for being willing to just take me up on my ask to participate in this conversation with Emily today. It's just been super enriching, and I'm also really thankful just for the opportunity to learn about the work of World Encounter and how they're making this big ripple effect for the women and their families and their communities through the microloan program. And I just also want to say Luke and I are pretty excited to attend the spring fundraiser coming up for World Encounter. And so you can actually purchase a ticket for the Rose event, and that's coming up at the end of April. So I'm going to just drop the link to that in the chat so that you can check that out. All the proceeds for that event are going to go to the microloan program and mentoring program in rural Tanzania. And I just think it's really important that we help more women farmers and business owners acquire the capital they need to get their start. So thanks again, Emily, and everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It was a joy to talk to all of you this morning. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Again, you can find information about all of today's speakers at women.worldencounter.org. I welcome you to join us at our final International Women's Day session today at noon. The stories we tell, how having diverse dialogues is key to thriving as moms and bosses. And I do hope to see you at our Spring Rose event, reaching out to sister entrepreneurs on April 24th. Looks like Allie has dropped that link into the chat box, but thank you for choosing to spend your precious time with us. Happy International Women's Day, and we'll see you back at noon.